everybody. Good to be here. Good to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I have a very stiff neck right now. I can't really move my body in a very free and liberated way, and it's an interesting adjustment. Actually, it's been like this for over a week now. Yeah, for over a week, my neck and my shoulders have been extremely stiff. And I don't know what my body's trying to communicate to me, but I'm just trying to understand this as information. Yeah. A couple of big things did happen last weekend. I won't go into the details of it, but I think that has something to do with it. I think it's my body saying that my brain is trying to deal with too many burdensome things right now. A lot of other people's burdens are weighing down on me at the moment. That's what it means. And I don't know what to do about it other than ride it out. Let this pass. Everything passes, everything changes, so that's what I'm waiting for. And it'll be okay. That's what I'm trying to convince myself of. It'll all be okay. Quick announcement. I think I mentioned this before, but I'm going to be in Anchorage, Alaska for the Before You Die Comedy Festival, which is running from April 5th all the way till April 10th. But I will be there from April 5th till April 8th. Okay, so I'm going to be in Anchorage, Alaska. And on April 8th, I will be doing a live recording of K-Drama School with some comedian guests. And I know that I haven't had a lot of guests on my podcast in the last several episodes. Dr. Ham was an exception. Tobias Hauser was another exception earlier in the year. And today's guest is another exception. But overall, I have not really been doing flashcard series. And I am going to do the flashcard series with my upcoming guests on April 8th. So if there is a K-drama that I've covered so far that I did not do a flashcard series with, then now is the time to put in that request. If there's a show that I covered so far that you would like me to do a flashcard series with a comedian during the April 8th live recording of K-Drama School, then just email me or comment in the comment box just the title of the show and just say flashcard series, please. Then I'll know. I will make note of it and I will consider it, and I will make flashcard series to make you all laugh with my comedian guest on April 8th. So that is coming up. Today I'm going to be talking about the show Crash Course in Romance starring do-yeon and kyung-ho, which is on Netflix if you're living in the United States, probably in some other countries. But if you're in South Korea, you know and you love this show because you've been watching it on TVN. Kyung-ho is a very familiar face in K-dramas because we've all seen him in Hospital Playlist. We also saw him again in Prison Playbook. But if you are like me and you have been watching old school K-dramas and you've definitely seen him on the show, I'm sorry, I love you. Yeah, he plays the character Jun on that show, and he's so fucking annoying. He's like the most annoying character on that show. And maybe that show just forever tainted my image of Chung Kyung-ho for life, because every time I see Chung Kyung-ho in every new K-drama that he's in, I'm just like not impressed by him. I'm like, this guy sucks. Like, I don't like him. Yeah, he sucks. So even if he's playing the lead, even if he's playing the protagonist that all the girls are supposed to fawn over, I'm like, he's not attractive. He's not manly. He's got nothing. He's very annoying, actually. He's good at playing annoying. I'll give him that. Yeah. And you know what? The character Chichia is a little bit annoying. He's like a tad annoying. Yeah. He's what Koreans would call 재수없어. Yeah. 재수없어 just means like, I don't know, brings ruins good fortune. That's what 재수없어 means, but you could also replace it with, calling somebody an asshole or calling somebody annoying. That's 재수없어. So for me, like, Chung Kyung-ho is a tad 재수없어. He's a tad annoying. Yeah, and he's good at playing annoying. He's good at playing Chichia. Chichia is a tad 재수없어. Chung Kyung-ho has been in Korean TV dramas for many years now, like 20 years now, okay? He's what you would call a veteran, okay? But if you have not seen Korean TV shows or films like that go past 10 years ago, then you are not as familiar with the lead protagonist of this show who plays Nam Heng-sun. Okay, Chun Do-yeon is the lead on this show, and you probably haven't seen her in K-dramas as of late because she hasn't really done too many K-dramas in her career. Chun Do-yeon is a veteran actress, and she's been in the Korean entertainment industry since the year 1990, and she has a very prolific and successful career as both a K-drama and Korean film actress, but I would say that she's more renowned for her big screen roles rather than her small screen roles. So I already covered this show, but in 1997 she was in the show Star in My Heart, and she was not the lead. She was a supporting friend on that show in 1997. And then around that same year, she was in a romance drama called The Contact or something, which was a huge box office success. But in the year 1999, 2 years after that, she starred in a film called Harmonium in My Heart, opposite Lee Byung-hun. Yeah, so a huge Hallyu actor. So she did that. That movie was a big box office success as well. She did other movies. She did Happy End. She did Untold Scandal. She was also in My Mother, the Mermaid, which is a very good movie. I highly recommend it. 고두심 is in that. She was also in You Are My Sunshine, which is a really interesting film that covers like HIV and AIDS as a theme. Yeah, check that out. Chun Do-yeon also stars in the Korean auteur filmmaker Lee Chang-dong's movie called Secret Sunshine, which I believe she won an award at Cannes when that film came out. Yeah, she won the Best Actress Award at Cannes for that role. And she starred opposite Song Kang-ho. Yeah, another Hallyu favorite. Song Kang-ho is in all of those Bong Joon-ho movies. Chun Do-hyun, huge film actress. And because she's been in so many big movies, that's probably why K-drama fans are not as familiar with her. But she is major, big deal. She starred alongside huge names, like I said, like, Song Kang-ho, Lee Byung-hun, Hwang Jung-min. She also starred in a movie with Gong Yoo and Bae Yong-joon and Choi Min-sik. Yeah, all of these actors are huge, and she is just as huge and was in these movies with them, okay? So, given this very impressive filmography in Chun Do-yeon's, acting career, I was very pleasantly surprised to see her starring in this Korean drama series. I was like, wait, what? It's you? And you're with kyung-ho? Like, he's like down here. He's also 10 years younger than she is. And they're like supposedly like, somewhat around the same age. It's very interesting how very few K-drama male talents there are, that they have to keep pairing them up with these like massive actresses. Yeah, it's very interesting. This pattern is continuing even with actresses like Chun Do-yeon. The last K-drama series that I saw Chun Do-yeon in is called Shoot for the Stars, which she starred in alongside Cho In-sung. Now, this show came out in like 2003, I think, and I have not seen this show like floating around on the internet and the dark web or anything like that. It's like an impossible show to find. I don't know why. I don't think I even saw the ending of this series when it was still on air, because my mom was renting the VHS tapes, and that's how I was watching this show in high school. But like, I think she just stopped renting the tapes. I think she was just like, yeah, this show sucks, and just like gave up. Yeah, I don't ever remember or recall seeing the ending of this series, which kind of sucks. And I want to revisit the show so that I could see what her chemistry was like with Cho In-sung. Cho In-sung, by the way, was not a good actor back then. He was actually kind of terrible. And, Chun Do-yeon is like huge. She's like up here, It's like, yeah, catch up, Also, they had, again, big age gap between these two actors. It's like so weird. Anyway. So, Chun Do-yeon, she was also in a series about 2 years ago alongside Ryu Jun-yeol, and that show was the ratings was like absolutely dead. It was like a terrible failure of a show. I don't think anybody saw the show, so I've missed it. It wasn't on my radar, and I never watched it. But She was in that 2 years ago. So it's out there. It's floating out there if you ever want to check it out. I don't think it's a good setup though. I mean, do-yeon is like 20 years older than do-yeon, and like, how is that going to work? I'm sorry. I'm progressive too, but a 20-year age gap between a man and a woman, I mean, the positive way to describe it is radical, but the other way is just weird. And for me, it's just a little too weird. That's a tad weird, man. I'm not sure if I could do it. This show, Crash Course in Romance, deals with some very relevant themes that are definitely floating around in my consciousness right now, like maternal abandonment, chosen family, autism, developmental trauma, mental illness, education in South Korea. I think the show handles all of these themes pretty well overall in that they mention it. They mention these ideas and these concepts and these issues, but how do they handle them all the way through is a whole different matter, okay? So I like the fact that Hing-sun's younger brother, Jae-woo, has Asperger's, and he successfully finds a romantic partnership in the end of the series. I was like, okay, that's a progressive story choice. I like that, all right? I like the fact that Chichia has all these physical ailments like sleep deprivation, eating disorder, and it's all because he's a workaholic. And I like the fact that the show does not fetishize his workaholism. I like the fact that the show critiques it and that Chichia comes to this awareness and starts taking care of himself more mindfully. I like that. Those are progressive story choices. I like the fact that Chichia is a kind and understanding teacher. Yeah. You know, like, while it is very much a reality and a truth and a fact that all of us have at one point experienced teachers who were negligent and abusive, it's also true that we've had teachers who were very present, very attentive, caring, kind, and impactful, and their lessons stay with us all of our lives, all right? That's just as true. So I'm glad that this show captured that truth and manifested it in the form of Chichia. I thought that was lovely. He's a very empathetic teacher, okay? He's tender and he's supportive and caring to his students, and he does what he can to maintain the students' interest and attention. And I was like, bravo, good for you. I love that. That's beautiful, all right? I love the fact that the actress do-yeon is back in this series, okay? Like, we all saw her in Our Blues. She was very impressive playing a pregnant teenager on that show. And she's back here playing another high school girl. I think do-yeon is like positioned to be the next big it girl in Korean entertainment, all right? She has a very unique look about her. She's very beautiful and attractive, but she has a maturity to her image. There's like a mature aura about her that really makes her perfect for any high drama roles. So I'm really excited to see more of her in Korean dramas and Korean films in the future, and I think she's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Now, here's what I don't understand about this show, okay? So, do-yeon, she plays the character Nam Hye in Crash Course in Romance, and her rival at school is this chick named Bang Sua. Now, Sua hates Hye. Sua hates Hye because Hye is effortlessly getting good grades, and she is effortlessly attracting the attention of good-looking boys in high school, all right? Sua hates Hye, is full of jealous rage, can't stand her, right? At the same time, Sua is very ambitious and determined, okay? She has a very overbearing mother who's a helicopter parent, and her mother is obsessed with getting her daughter into a good college, all right? And Sua is under her, like, a lot of self-induced pressure, all right? And it's to the point where Sua starts to have these visual hallucinations. She starts to hallucinate that the words and letters on her paper start to float off. She starts hallucinating, like, warped images of her face when she looks at herself in the mirror, all right? She's clearly having a psychological breakdown, okay? But how does this show handle Sua's storyline? I'll tell you how. It doesn't. It doesn't. We just see Sua having these episodes and she doesn't get any help. Yeah, she tells her mother about it. She tells her mother about it early on in the series, but her mother doesn't take her to the hospital. We don't see that ever. Her mom calls her psychologist friend and asks questions, but there's no, like, Sua going to get therapy or counseling. There's none of that. We don't ever see Sua getting better. We just see Sua having these breakdowns time after time, and it's always dealt in the exact same way. Her mom is just like, huh? Like frozen. And then we just jump to the next scene. This story doesn't deal with Sua's mental and emotional breakdown at all. At all. Just 2 years go by, and in the end, in the last episode, we see that Sua is like in medical school and going to school just fine, and she and Hei are on good terms. Like, there was no resolution. It's like, how did she get there? How is she still okay? Her mom is like just an administrator at a hagwon, and that's it. Like, whatever happened with her storyline? What happened with the husband? What happened with your daughter? Your relationship is strained in your family. You're a mess. You're a hot mess, bitch. Like, how did you... This show does not deal with that storyline at all. At all. I think the showrunner and director really mishandles Sua's storyline, even though it's a very important one. Like, what is protocol when a student starts having these kinds of episodes? What is the parent supposed to do? What is the student supposed to do? How is a teacher supposed to intervene? All right? None of these questions ever get answered on this show, and I feel like that was a huge disservice, not only to the show itself, but to the audiences as well, all right? Because it's raising issues, but then it doesn't deal with them at all. Lee Hee-jae, the older brother to Sun-jae, who is Hei's best friend, the one that is initially suspected to be the one that's shooting these metal balls, okay? He's like mute for the first several episodes of the show. Yeah, we have no idea what his deal is. Like, how did he end up here? Why is he like locked up in his room by himself blasting music? Like, what's his story? We don't know. They never get into it. Yeah, all we know is that like he had some psychological break and now he's just a recluse in the house and he doesn't talk. But then later it turns out he does talk. What is that about? I didn't know that he speaks. I thought he was mute. I thought the show was making a progressive choice by showing us a deaf and mute person. But no, it's like he had some problems, but he can talk and he's actually normal. He's fine. Like, what is that? What the fuck is that? Hei's childhood trauma around her mother's abandonment, that was also really poorly handled on the show, okay? So, like, we know that Hei's mother abandoned her, ditched her at her grandmother and her sister's place at the restaurant when Hei was a little girl, and she just disappears. All right, fine. Grandmother dies, and then Heng-sun is now the one that needs to, take care of this little girl and her autistic younger brother. Okay, fine. We established that. That's too bad, but we established that. And then, just like totally out of left field, after 10 some odd years, her mother just shows up in Hei's life. Okay, and Hei doesn't have like a moment of reckoning with her mother. She doesn't flip out all the way and rage out on her mother. She doesn't cry. Her mother doesn't have any sense of remorse. It's just like, what? You guys are seriously, this is how you're going to handle it? And then her mother abandons her again. Yeah, as soon as Hei says, I'm going to go and live with you, her mother abandons her for a second time. And then everybody's like, okay, that's fine. We're going to deal with that. What? What is that? No. He is not okay. She's not at all normal. Like, that's all fucked up. That's all craziness, all right? But no, they're just like, this is how it's going to be, all right? Like, parental abandonment affects a child greatly, all right? I know it because I've lived with it. It is earth-shattering, all right? There's no way in hell Hei is okay with that, okay? Like, there's no way in hell that Hei is ever going to be normal after that, all right? The show did not handle that well. Oh, but the show was attentive in how trauma manifests as physical ailments. Like, for instance, Hei suffers from migraines. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Not only because, she's like a sensitive young lady, but also because she has developmental trauma disorder. Yeah, that's like migraines. That's like a standard. Yeah. Okay, good. We know that. So we have that insight. I was like, okay, that's helpful. But then everything else... it's like this is like a melodrama. This is a rom-com, but it's also a melodrama, and they could have leaned into this, but they really don't. And I was like, that's fucking weird. I guess what I'm saying is the show makes an effort to activate some very valid questions while dealing with young people's mental trauma or emotional disturbances, but it does not effectively answer any of the questions that come up alongside raising those issues. The show does a good job at keeping the story moving forward. I thought the whole plot point with Chi Dong-hee, I thought that was interesting. Chi Dong-hee being Chichia's manager. I thought that was an interesting plot point. It definitely kept the story moving forward with this little aspect of like criminal thrill. Okay, I was like, that's interesting. But everything else when it came to the issue of young people's mental health and emotional well-being, that was not followed through. All right, so I would just say that the show creators were perhaps a tad unprepared at handling this matter in this show. So, noble attempt, and kudos to your noble attempt, but boo-hoo at the fact that you left a whole bunch of strings untied. My guest today is actor and improv comedian Ron Song. Ron is a very interesting artist here in Los Angeles. So he has a degree in sculpting. That's his background. Ron once worked with a very influential artist named Baek Namjoon, whose name often gets butchered in the American lexicon as Namjoon Pike. But that's not how it's pronounced. It's Baek Namjoon. Baek Namjoon was part of the Fluxus movement, which was a massive movement that was influential in the 60s and 70s. It included people like Teresa Hakkyung-cha, also people like Yoko Ono, also people like John Cage, okay? Ron once worked with Baek Namjoon, and I was like, that's fucking awesome. That's super cool. And Ron once told me this story, which I hope he doesn't mind me sharing, but Ron said that Baek Namjoon gave him and some of the other students that he was working with like some illustration that Baek Namjoon did. And Ron had it in his archives, but then Ron lost that drawing. And his subconscious motivation, which he admitted to me, was that like, oh, like, I don't want to, you know, like, overthink this or like hype up Baek Namjoon in my brain, you know? And then like Ron was kind of saying to me like, oh, and I regret that. I regret having been so, you know, egotistical and arrogant and, you know, not having looked after that drawing with as much care and attention as I should have. That's what he told me when I met him at Peter's birthday party. And my thinking to that is, I think that was actually the proper intention. It's like, yeah, we shouldn't, you know, put these heroes up on a pedestal and hierarchy because there is no hierarchy. Like, nobody is above us. The only thing that is, you know, like my how do we say, not even a role model, but like the figure that I strive to be and strive to become is my own higher self. Yeah, that's the only thing that I'm going to put as above me on a pedestal. Like, no other celebrity or historical figure or, you know, major influencer is ever going to take that place. And I think Ron unwittingly made that choice when he said, well, Baek Namjoon, whatever, you know, yeah, he's a big deal, but also he's not a big deal. And I think that youthful hubris and spirit was actually the right path. Yeah, as weird and radical as that may sound, but I'm like, no, that is actually the correct path. And now Ron is currently in this big transition phase where he's fully devoting all of his time and energy to being an actor and performer here in Hollywood. And I think that is fucking fantastic and a huge celebratory success. Yeah, when anybody does that. So kudos to Ron, and let's talk to Ron Song. There was one thing I was like, I have to ask him this.
Okay.
Did you ever write a song called The Ron Song?
No, no, I
Why
never
not?
did.
You have to. You have to, though.
I should, right? Yeah.
You have to. It's like an inevitability. That's a task on
It
your
was
to do.
I I should. I avoided a little bit because I like when I was a kid, that was one of the things that um that people, friends would make fun of me about, right? And so they would say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're the wrong song," or yeah. So
Uh-huh.
it's always just been in the back of my head that I should reclaim it.
You have to. You must.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Are you musically inclined? Can you play music?
Not really, no.
Or maybe what about your family members?
I have some friends, sure,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
mean, I can belt out a karaoke tune.
There you go. So you just
Yeah,
write
take me to Norebang. I'll be all
just
right.
write your lyrics and then ask them to compose and then you sing it and it's the Ron song. And that's your song. It's like you have to do it. I was like, why doesn't he have a song called the Ron song? Because it sounds
That's the
so good.
burning question.
It was the burning. It was like it was right here. I was like, I have. That's the first thing I have to ask him. Did he ever write a song called the Ron song? That was like the first thing to
Oh
do.
my gosh,
And now that
that's fantastic.
you gave me the answer, which is no, and we now know that you have to do this. We can end the podcast now. Now we could end it. Now we could
Yeah, gotta be
leave.
done.
All right. Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Complete. Take care.
Yeah. Fucking A. Because I don't know a lot of Koreans with the name Ron or Ronald.
Yeah. I've never met another Korean named Ron.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
really
just
have to write the song. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know, it's something that my parents yeah, was it Ron? Can't remember if it was Ronald Reagan that they wanted
Maybe.
to kind of that was in the back of their minds when I was a kid, but
Yeah.
um yeah,
Probably.
like all other 1.5 generation kids, I came here
Yeah.
and then they named me, right? Gave
Right,
me an
right.
English name.
Was Reagan like in office at the time or
I think it was Carter when I first came here, and then it
okay.
was Reagan.
So yeah. So okay. But Reagan was still like I mean he was a celebrity already.
Yeah, I don't know if they knew. My parents did watch like they movies like The Ten Commandments and Ben Hur and things like
Uh-huh.
that when they were in
Yeah.
Korea, and that was a huge
Yeah.
thing for them. So Charlton
Yeah,
Heston they knew,
absolutely.
but for some
Yeah.
reason Ron stuck for them.
Because I know that like the name Grace is also very popular among like Korean families for
Hmm.
religious reasons, but also
Sure.
because they loved Grace Kelly because she was in all
Oh,
these like
nice.
Hitchcock films. Yeah. And they were like, "Oh yeah, Grace Kelly, Grace." Yeah, like Hollywood. So it was both like Hollywood and church.
Right.
And that's also Ronald Reagan, Hollywood, church, politics. Yeah.
Right. Right.
My
It's all
son
there.
Ronald. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's the reason why we named our son Spencer
Oh yeah?
from for old Hollywood.
Ah.
Yeah, like
What
Spencer Tracy.
you have two children.
Yeah, my second son, a younger son, his name is Wesley with a T,
Oh wow.
and I think we were like sort of going over these names, and we thought we had just finished watching the Princess Bride again, and I was like, oh, that's a great name. So, and it
Yeah,
means from
yeah.
the West, so we thought, okay, okay, cool, we'll name him that.
There you go. Yeah. Wesley, interesting. Princess Bride is
Now, what's
interesting
your
too.
Korean name?
It's a very common name. It's as common as Grace. It's Hyunju.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it is common.
Very common.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's Ojilhyun, so
Uh huh.
meaning like benevolence or graciousness. So it means grace actually.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's 구슬주, so like marble, pearl, like roundness, beauty, wisdom.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. Why? What's
Yeah.
your Korean name?
It's 석빈.
Oh,
It's
very unique.
클석자
Uh-huh.
and 빛날 빈자.
It's a very great. That's an excellent name. Yeah.
So like just big and bright.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
unique. I don't know a lot of 석빈s. Yeah.
It's our 돌림 is 빈 in
Oh, that's such a pretty one.
It is. It's a nice. I never knew. Growing up here, I always everyone called me like if they wanted to know my Korean name, they were like, "Oh, Sukbin," because it was spelled
Hmm.
like SUK.
Yep.
But so I never really liked it. But then I lived in Korea, right, from
Hmm.
'92 to '96,
Hmm.
and it's when I started to realize, oh my gosh, I that name is kind of nice.
It's a great
Um,
name. Yeah.
yeah. My brother's name is also quite nice. It's Habin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. What's his English name?
David is very common. David.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So your name is unique in both like for Korean American and in Korea. Like it's a very unique name. And you have to write the Ron song and uh you have to integrate bigness and
Yeah,
brightness in there.
right, right. That'll be the
The
theme.
the Ron
That'll be the
song.
tone.
Uh-huh. Big and bright. No, and I understand the that sort of like painful conflicted agony around having Seok in your name
Yeah,
because my dad's name is Seokji.
Tokji. Okay,
Yeah, so
Tokji.
he's
Yeah.
he's also dealt with the same agony. Yeah. And then he became a born again Christian and then renamed himself as Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's 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 a pretty powerful name.
Yeah. Mhm. It is. Yeah. He was like, I like Joseph. I'm gonna name myself Joseph. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
you do you. Yeah. Yeah.
Recently, probably in the past, like I say recently, but it's probably the past 15 years. I went to a church with my wife, and in Grand Rapids, where she's from,
Uh-huh.
and the pastor who was there is a young kind of, and I'm not religious
Mhm.
in any way, but
Mhm.
really kind of going there for my mother-in-law, right?
Mhm.
And he told the story about Mary and Joseph and the Christmas story because it was around Christmas time when we were visiting, and
Mhm.
I was blown away by the fact that he was saying so historically Joseph was maybe like in his 30s, right, and Mary was 13, and
What?
yeah, so
Oh
Mary
my
was is
god.
adolescent.
Oh my
And
god.
so when you see this sort of age difference, and then you also see like, okay, immaculate conception, and you start to think about this idea that it was sort of, a kind of taboo relationship, right? I mean, not as taboo as it is now, obviously, but you have the discrepancy of an older man and an adolescent child, and then you think, okay, there's a how else can that child explain the a pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's just so much more to the reality of that mythology
Mhm.
than we're given or sort of taught, right? So
So we were talking about Immaculate Conception and how Mary was 13. I'm shocked. My brain is blown to pieces right now. But I mean, in a way, like back then, all teenagers were getting married and getting pregnant. Like it was the same in ancient Korea too. Like at 12, 13, perhaps even younger, like 10, you were gonna get married. Yeah. They sent you off. It was just that was the way it went. Doesn't make it right, but also, people died sooner back then, so it was like time is not the same as what we think now. Age and time is different from back then, right?
absolutely.
But shit, yeah. Ugh. It's so wild. I don't know, but on the other hand, like, have you ever read like Yogananda, his book? You've probably heard of it though, right? Like here and there, like this figure Yogananda.
Yes.
He's like the guy that brought yoga to the Western culture. Like It wasn't a white lady who did it. It was this Indian guru, right? And he was just like really into Jesus and his history. And like I got like a box set of books that Yogananda wrote about Christ and his history. And it's like a fascinating, you know, insight into that realm that the Bible doesn't talk about, of course. Like they cut out all of Jesus's life. It's like Jesus was born and then he was like 8 and then suddenly he's 30 something years. He's
Right.
30. They skip all the middle part. And so like what Yogananda's written scriptures talk about are Jesus's in-between life. And what he says is Jesus went to India. He studied in India. And I'm like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah,
Like, makes total sense. Hmm.
that's amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Um, but the other thing that he says about Immaculate Conception is he's like, well, the possibility is there, kind of like how there are certain animals and certain plants that can immaculately conceive, or they can just produce offspring on their own.
Sure.
Like they have their own reproductive things. And I'm like, makes sense. If that's in nature, why couldn't a human person do the same? Okay, like that's an explanation. My mind is open to it. Yeah.
Right, right.
Because ultimately, there's no way for us to fucking know really exactly what went down.
Yeah.
But what you're saying too, as a 13-year-old, like there's a movie called Electric Children. It's like an indie film. Uh, do you watch Ozark?
I
Ozarks?
did. I watched that series. Yeah.
You know the blonde, curly-headed blonde girl, the
Mhm.
evil girl? She is the protagonist in this movie, Electric Children. And she's like a Mormon or something, like in one of these Puritan colonies. And she listens to a tape with like soft core rock music. And then she thinks that she became impregnated after listening to this tape. Yeah.
Wow.
But of course, the suggestion is like she was probably, assaulted or something. But it's like there's a blockage there. And her explanation is she listened to this tape that she should not have been listening to. It's a secular music thing. And now she's pregnant because she listened to this tape. And I think that kind of is parallel to this story that you just told me, the one that you heard in
Right.
Michigan. Mm,
I think in a lot of ways that the religious sort of transcendence, right, kind of where what we put our faith into
yeah,
um, is is so strong because it's not questioned, and it can't be. Well, I mean, it is questioned quite often, but there's always an ultimate, like, you know, cliff, which is, well, that's what I believe, and belief is
exactly.
always stronger than fact or
Uh-huh.
anything along those lines, and it sort of powers human behavior in
Hmm.
really powerful ways. It's kind of, in many ways it's really scary, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was listening to your podcast, an earlier one, where you were talking with I'm horrible with names, so it was the Harvard uh,
The
their
doctor?
doctor. Yes, yes, yes.
Dr. Jacob Hom?
Hmm. And
Yeah.
powerful episode, by the way. And
Yeah.
um, those you guys touched on shamanism, and
Yes.
you know, part of the from when I studied at Yonsei University, I was a foreign exchange student. One of the
Yeah.
reasons we were discussing why Christianity took such a strong hold
Hmm.
in Korean culture, because the colonization and religion was introduced in Japan and Korea
Hmm.
around the same time.
Hmm.
The
Yep.
adoption rates were radically different,
Yes.
um, and it was because of the kind of you know dogmatic shamanism that people were able to sort of glom onto Christianity in such a strong way.
Mm.
Well, that makes so much sense,
Mm.
as it is, that kind of, because shamanism is so direct, right? And it's just personal.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that kind of connection, I thought, wow, okay, that makes absolute sense. Whereas, you know, the sort of Shinto Buddhism is so much more abstract, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's that's actually giving me a lot of insight right now because I like the book I'm writing right now is called K-Drama School. So I'm looking at school as an institution, overachievement, success, economics, pressuring, child abuse, da 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 da, da, militarism, blah blah blah. Okay, I'm looking at that. But my next book is going to be called K-Drama Church, and I'm looking at the church as an institution and what Christianity is to South Korea or the Korean Peninsula as a whole, and all of that history. And you telling me that the dogmatic aspect, the heaviness and the intensity and perhaps the strictness that shamanic figures had over Korea, that probably was a strangulating thing. But today, or even not even today, like let's talk 90s South Korea even, right? There were all these cults in the 80s, especially 90s, a lot of cults. There were these like Korean pastors and reverends that would like exorcise demons out of Korean people, like whole congregations having these like spiritual revivals. I'm not gonna put quotations, it's probably a real thing, but like, it was like so intense, like viscerally, physically expressionistic and intense. And I'm like, in what way is this different from what shamanic, you know, rituals were like? They're fucking identical.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 A story I remember is that I lived in a hospital when I was
Mm.
there,
Hmm.
boarding house, and one of the students was a medical student,
Mm.
and she and I were talking about, um, as part of, like, it wasn't just the rotation, but some volunteer work that she did with the medical students, how she went to um, rural villages, and uh, they discussed sort of, um, safe sex,
Mm.
condom usage, and so one of the ways they demonstrated the condom was to, unwrap it onto
Yeah.
a banana and some condoms, and say, this is how you do it. And what they saw the next day were bananas with condoms on them hung outside the door,
Amazing.
right? So that kind of, and this was, in the early 90s, right? I was there.
Why did they do that? To symbolize what?
It was warding off, uh,
Warding off rape?
I think, warding off pregnancy. Uh,
Oh,
right? This is the way
oh,
you avoid pregnancy, and say this is
oh,
use it. So it's rather than um, making the direct connection between a banana and a penis,
yeah.
they use the same kind of um, uh, means that they would hang things on their,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
that's what they noticed, and I'm like, wow,
Because like mothers would do this or grandmothers would do this like when they wanted their daughter-in-law to get pregnant with a boy, they would hang like peppers on the
yes,
thing. Yeah. It was
yeah,
always peppers. I was like, I mean, what about a girl? They didn't have fucking give a shit about that. So they
right,
didn't hang jack shit for daughters. No. It's like they would hang peppers, you know? Um, that is so interesting because, I read tarot cards, and I was just giving myself a reading this morning, and then I was like, these were just pictures at one point. Like a tarot deck was just a guy drawing pictures and created a fun play deck. And
right,
now it's associated with divinity, with like answering questions about life and fortune telling. And it's like, how did it turn into that? And it's like very easy how and why
right,
people just started to ascribe meaning to each card. And they analyze every aspect of the card because they're pictures. And each item, like water or a cup or fire or wood, they they have these symbolic meanings associated with them because we've been doing it for, you know, thousands of years. For as long as human beings have existed, that's all we've been doing. And that's how tarot cards now have meaning because so many people ascribe those meanings to them. And it's like that village and that household
Mhm.
started doing that by hanging bananas with condoms on in front of their house. Amazing.
And the thing that I like, in our household, the thing that we think is the cutest also is just the idea that, um, we used to tell our kids that I have two boys, and they were
Yeah.
like, okay, so make sure if you're when they're when we're washing them as babies and things like
Yeah.
that, and that we would call the penis gochu
Yeah.
for that exact reason, right? And so
So
it's
cute.
yes,
Yeah.
for a penis is pepper.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this whole like how do you say it's like indigenous like folk sort of there's like a coziness to it. There is. There's like a childlike innocence to it, even like that action of hanging those bananas with a condom, like it's like it's such a childlike, pure kind of expression of hope,
Yeah,
because that's what children do. Like children enact magic in that way all the time, They're like, I'm gonna put this pillow here because it has a meaning to them
yeah, yeah.
that
So true.
some of us
And
don't get. Yeah.
like part of what I was curious, um, in your study and your writing, as you're sort of researching your book and you're writing your book, there's something that was really interesting to me anyway, that I was thinking about the early 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where when I was in Korea, that was the first
Mm-hmm.
time that was the Busan International Film Festival in
Mm-hmm.
1995. Um, and Seokyeonjae, that film was
Yes.
uh, hugely impactful
Yes. Yes.
globally, and but there was Korean dramas were very, it was pervasive, it was everywhere,
Yep.
right? And it was culturally significant
Mm-hmm.
and remains to be. But something, I think, around that time to me culturally shifted, right? And
Yeah.
it might have been the IMF, it might have been
Uh-huh.
so much.
Even before IMF. It was just like in an intense transition period, yeah.
It seemed like there was a move away from like earnestness, right?
Mm.
And where I saw this was like I was teaching English in Korea at a Hagwon,
Yeah. Yeah.
and inevitably at least one male per class would say that, we all said, okay, well, what's your English nickname? So you can give yourself an English nickname, and inevitably there was at least one student that would say that his name was Rice.
Oh, interesting.
And rice was so important to them because there was a trade dispute with the United States, where um, the U.S. there was an imbalance, so they wanted to export more rice, both to Japan and to Korea. And Korea was like, no, you don't want your nuclear weapons, and we don't want your rice. And um, and we're just thinking about this, and that kind of direct translation from a sort of, you know, um, trade imbalance or trade dispute
Yeah.
to the pride in rice as a just an, a Korean, a part of Korean identity,
Yeah.
and then to be able to name themselves that, right? Say this is,
Yeah.
and there was like somebody would say like, I'm rice, no, I want to be rice too. So then, like, how do you want to, differentiate yourselves in this situation?
There's all different there's kumbap,
Yeah,
there's
잡고.
there's all different kinds, man. You could be 콩나물밥, right?
That's
You
right.
could be
Right.
all kind you could be 회덮밥. There's all different kinds. 초밥, right?
You
Fucking
were
go. Get creative with it. That's fascinating though. I mean, the first thing that just comes to mind is, well, Korea was ravaged by countries like the United States, USSR, China, and Japan. Considering that, um, there's fear. There's always going to be fear. The initial impulse from Korea will always inevitably be fear.
Right.
If somebody suggests something new, it's like, no, what the fuck? What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
And this notion around rice is even more of a trigger because South Koreans and North Koreans to this day are still starving, but the nation knows what starvation is like.
Right.
It's a deep pain. It's a psychic wound in the nation as a whole. Starvation was real. Parents saw babies die in front of them because of malnutrition and starvation. That will not go away for another couple of centuries, I feel like. So, and there's also that saying, they say papshim, right? Like you get your strength from rice. They don't say, and people don't ask you, did you eat food? They ask you, did you eat rice?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So rice is like this center thing that's equivalent to strength, your whole being, right? They're like, they associate it with studying hard. It's like, oh, you got to eat a lot if you're going to
Yeah.
study. You got to eat a lot if you're going to be a good athlete. You got to eat a lot if you're going to any uh ability to live, yeah, is associated with rice. So
Yeah.
I think that cultural, maybe political reaction was one out of fear, but it triggered this like memory of the trauma of starvation too at the same time.
And there's something like that is so poignant about the idea that we call food rice,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
is the one and the same. There's no difference between food
One
and
and the same. Even if they had a sandwich for lunch, you know, they'll
yeah,
say 밥 먹었어요? It's like 네, 밥 먹었어요. It's
right.
like they had bread and they had, cold cuts, but yes, I did. And it's
That's
rice. It's always rice that's
yeah.
used. Uh-huh. It's
You know
fascinating.
the reason why I bring that up and is because the post I left Korea in 90 like December 25th in 1996, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And just before like
Right
every
before the mayhem.
yeah. And it was also when I went back to visit my wife and I went back for our honeymoon to
Hmm.
Korea. Now, maybe not the best like honeymoon because she just had to do like kunja to family members and everything.
Yeah.
But
And
the
when did you go back for the honeymoon?
in '06,
Oh, wow. Okay. So 10 years later.
I noticed something dramatically different about. I mean, I did anyway because my wife
Yeah.
had been previously, but we were like, whoa, the things that are there now, there's kitsch, right? Kitsch
Uh-huh.
colors. Irony is a huge part of how people discuss their own history and their
Hmm.
past, and I was like, this was not the case. Like we remember that the Korean drama in the early '90s called 아들과 딸,
Oh,
like
I didn't see that one.
sons
No.
and daughter, a son and daughter.
Okay.
Um, the names of those children were Krinam,
Uh-huh.
right, the
Wow.
treasured son,
Yeah.
and Hunam after.
Wow. Jesus.
Yeah, and it was such a huge show. It's just before I think Moreshige,
Okay.
right? But that the names of those main characters, and again, it was like a national phenomenon, right?
So intense. Yeah.
It's so intense and it's so direct and earnest,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that I think is what shifted and changed. And now
Yeah.
what I see is far more, I mean, I love it. It's just far more nuanced, complex. And it was
Yeah.
complex at the time too, but it was steadfastly earnest, right?
And literal. Yeah.
Yeah, and literal. Exactly.
Yeah. Because there was no space or capacity to allow in those dimensions of irony, satire. Not to say that irony and satire and kitsch did not at one point exist, but it's more like when you're in a survival mode, your sense of humor disappears.
Yes.
Your ability to look at something from a different perspective vanishes completely. Your It's just tunnel vision. You have tunnel vision.
Yeah, it's
And
subsistence, right? It's
yeah,
just live.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure you've seen these, like probably in the mid 2000s, you've probably seen these, like, like shirts and t-shirts with like nonsense English written on them in Korea.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like to me, I don't know, to me that is like it's like couched in both earnestness and satire. It's like there's this artist, his name is Jason Lee, um, and he's from Masan.
Hmm.
And he's a karaoke bar like uh what do you call it? He's like one of the partners at this famous karaoke bar in Manhattan in K-Town called MK. And Jason's also a sculptor and an artist. Like he has a BFA from I think Hongik, I think from Hongdae.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he's very talented. And his like his signature is like making luxury brands, but like with the nonsense English below it. So like instead of Chanel, it's Channel.
Yeah.
Instead of Louis Vuitton, it's like Louis Vuitton, or it's like that's his thing.
Fantastic.
um like imitating Korean luxury brands that would do the same. Like these Korean luxury brands, like I have an emo in Itaewon who was part of this black market, the underground illegal black market, where she would create imitation Louis Vuitton bags that looked fucking like perfect, right? But of course the quality's shit, so it doesn't last forever like Louis Vuitton purses should. It would break apart in 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, but like with her, she's taking that more seriously. It's like it has to look exactly like it. But there are others who would try to make it look exactly like it, but their English is so lousy that they would miss a letter or two here or there. Yeah. I think when you were in Korea, I think that was happening. A lot of that was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I bought my fair share of Polexes, like right at each one. And what I do like I really enjoy the the transition between being unaware because there was a lack of knowledge to being aware and continuing the same process, and so that you can't differentiate between those that are unaware and continue to remain unaware, or and those that are hyper aware and utilizing it. And that, to me, I think that's that's the most interesting sort of thing culturally, to see high and low art kind of combine, and where you can't differentiate the two,
You
right?
can't.
Yeah.
It's all happening at once and very fast. And then there's the question of, well, what about the processing of the shame factor? Because that shame is there. It's like, oh my God, I spent 20 grand printing these purses and it has the wrong name on it. What the fuck? The shame that a person could feel about that all of a sudden, like that still goes on. That still goes on. And there's no mention of how one is processing that shame ever, ever. Nobody wants to look at it. They just move on. It's like, okay, well, I was a dumb fuck back then, but not anymore. Let's get more serious. It's like, let's move on. Let's move on. South Korea moves at a rapid pace because of that. They're running away from shame. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to admit to it. It's like, oh, you know what? Actually, this is kind of kitchen funny. Okay, you know what? That was the intention. Yeah, 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 yeah. Let's go
Yeah.
with that. This was never my parents' mistake. No, 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 no. Let's not fucking look at that. I can't even open that lid. No.
Right. Right.
Like, I'm sure you've noticed this too, but in South Korea, it's like, it's the same street I walk through in Sinchon every day on my way to Yeondae. This store to my right was a bakery on
Mhm.
Monday. On Wednesday, it's a shoe store. How? They're so fast.
It's so fast.
So fucking fast. It's literally like that. It's like Monday, it was a bakery they were selling food, pastries. Tuesday, it's closed and they're doing construction.
Yeah.
Wednesday, it's a shoe store that is fully like selling shoes. Totally
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
business.
Where in Shinchon did you live?
I didn't live in Sinchon. I lived in Mapo. I lived in Yeomnidong, Mapo. So
Okay.
it was like a few miles off, but it was like I would still walk to school like just to get my exercise. So it would be like a long like maybe
That's a
five
long walk. Yeah.
yeah, like 5, 6 miles or whatever. But um yeah, I lived in Mapo.
Okay. I lived in Shincheon for the entire time I was in Korea.
When you were there, were they also because Sinchon's very famous for their 닭갈비?
Mhm.
And was 닭갈비 famous back then too? Not as much, right?
There, no. Um, I think a couple of things that were popular was 부대찌개,
Oh,
which I to this day I absolutely love
is
uh,
the best.
budae-jjigae. And that was when Toksuri Dabang was still there on the corner right in front of their.
Yes. Yes.
I think at some point they it grew and then it disappeared in the same way. Right? But I
Yeah.
that was the staple. That's where everyone used to go to.
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. No, Shinchon's great. And again, like that's just a testament to how like fast Korea is. It's like, when I was there in 2010 to 2011. It was when I was in Korea. And I was like researching at Hyundai. But by then, it's like 닭갈비 was like the concentrated branded food item of Sinchon by
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
And it's like that's when like that show 1박 2일 was like airing and all these like regions were starting to pride themselves on what's our food here. Like it wasn't always a thing. It was probably like one restaurant where their 부대찌개 or their 닭갈비 or their, 갈비찜 or whatever was like decent. And then
Mhm.
they're like the cultural ministry of that area was just like, okay, we need to now make this a brand and like attract tourism. And Korea's so fast.
So, so I grew up in a place called Temple City, right?
Okay.
It's in Southern California, in LA County, and there's something really sort of distinctive about Asian merchant behavior, right?
Oh,
They create districts
yeah.
that people can come and they know, and where it's sort of counterintuitive to American commerce, which is like competition based. So
Mm,
if you have one store and you have a similar store across the street, then it's who will survive, right?
mm,
It's going to be the last one standing because it's
yeah.
competition based.
Yeah.
Whereas in Asia, you have districts.
Yeah.
So on the main road in Temple City, Asia, more there was more Chinese immigrants, and they would open up wedding photography stores.
Uh-huh.
And so there may be five or six of them on the main road,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so the belief, and it was even in one of the newspaper, like local papers, that it was potentially a sex ring slash
Oh.
terrorist front. And I'm like,
So it's
like,
white press
exactly.
paranoia.
Like, what are
Okay.
you talking about? This is a merchant district, and
Yeah.
they're trying to create a space. Like
Right.
Ayeongdong in Seoul is a wedding district, so you can get your wedding dresses in Ayeongdong, right?
Yeah.
So there are
Yeah.
like hundreds of wedding stores there, so you can figure out how to get your dresses.
Yeah.
Just the same way, like you were saying, Shinchon is now known for its 닭갈비, right?
Yeah. And
A
it's
mock,
like it's a community thing. That's what
yeah,
you're emphasizing. It's a
that's
community
exactly
thing.
right. It's about community, and now everyone knows that there's a district that you can go to. It's a place that,
That whole area.
and then everyone benefits, right, from
Exactly.
planning. It's so counterintuitive to American commerce, um, and but it's still wonderful that way.
I think uh yeah, like Korea does the same thing. And yeah, that whole like white media paranoia thing, which is like xenophobia, xenophobia, that's like deeply embedded in American culture from like the 1800s. But um like in Chungmuro, for instance, in Seoul, in Chungmuro, like if you go down that street, it's all cameras. Like old school, like vintage cameras. They sell film, like rolls of film. I would go there every couple of weeks, like, because when I was living in Seoul in 2010. I was doing black and white photography on like a Lomo camera. There was this camera called the Diana Lomo, and I was just like photographing. And so I would go and buy like they would sell like expired black and white film in like a case for like 1,000원. And so I would buy those, and it was just like a thing. Like I love the ritual of going down that street,
Mhm.
finding these things or finding accessories for my camera. And then they also had developers like in that area. So I would just, give them the film rolls. They would develop it and then give me the prints. It was like a fun activity. And it's- that shit just annoys me. Like when I was I've moved around a lot throughout my lifetime, but I mostly grew up in New York. And briefly, from third grade to seventh grade, I lived in Palisades Park, New Jersey. And Palisades Park, New Jersey is like Koreatown. It's a very small town, Palisades Park, but it's just the whole town is like Korea, you know? And there was this time when I was living there in the mid 90s in 95, there were these articles printed in the local New Jersey press that this one strip was just like full of it. They were calling them like room salons or, suggesting that there was like, like sexual, behavior, sex trafficking or, prostitution going on at these like norebangs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were, but like it was just like, why would they just jump to that conclusion? Like I went to that norebang with my parents one time, like just to sing after 회식, after we
Yeah.
had dinner. We just went there to sing songs. Like families go there. When I was in high school, middle school and high school, I would go to those norebangs and hang out for hours with my friends. Like kids went there. And when we went there, none of us were jerking one another off or hiring prostitutes. Like we were not doing that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, like, why does the white media say this about like as if sex is not a thing in every culture, as if sex was not used as a currency in every single culture, like as if white militarism does not produce what's called a sex camp, like those camp towns are for serving American soldiers and satisfying their sexual needs. Like to me, like that white press is only exposing the shame of US militarism and their repressed sex crimes. Let's call them sex crimes, because like a lot of the times those are crimes, like, around those sex camps, there were also like schools because, you know, women become pregnant, they have kids, those kids need to go to a school, you
Yeah.
know. Those soldiers also have children. Those children need to go to schools. There was like a movie, I forget it might have been Camp Arirang. It's a documentary, but it's like one of those like experimental, like, video graphic kind of movies. And uh, there's a scene where there's a soldier, an adult soldier, an American adult soldier holding hands and walking with like a schoolgirl,
Oh,
and they're just walking, like, and the camera is like filming them from behind,
yeah.
and there's no narrative, there's no music, there's no nothing. It's just that image of the two walking, and the
And
questions
interesting
come
that,
up. Questions
that
come up.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, right, how tragic that the implication of a soldier and a child um from World War II was really here. Have a
Oh, yeah.
Hershey bar, right? Have
Yeah.
a Hershey's
Hmm.
chocolate as a
Hmm.
way of sort of ingratiating American soldiers into the local culture,
Yeah.
then to see that, right,
Yeah.
as a child, uh, and have that implication be completely radically different.
Totally, totally altered.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
just it's a shame to a large degree, but at the same time, it's like that's the reality of any military camp or base in any country.
Yeah. Yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's really no way to say like, well, this was right or this was wrong. Like
right.
if we go in with this binary goggle, it's you're doomed to hit a bunch of dead ends.
Yeah, the thing that uh, what we were talking earlier about these districts, and it's like if you get to a place where um, there were a large preponderance of barbershops,
Mm.
Korean barbershops, then you may then you might have a little bit of concern there. And also if you're in the 80s and 90s, right?
Oh, I don't get that reference. What do you mean?
Well, barbershops were places to or fronts to sell sex
Oh,
in.
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea. Oh my God. Oh
So,
my God. Are you serious?
oh yeah, yeah.
I'm shocked right now.
So there used to be those swirly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Not all of them were that way, but the idea that women would be that close to men, right? Cutting their hair and touching them, and
Oh, I
that provided the
see.
opportunities for that avenue, right? And it became popularized
Oh
to.
my God. What you just said just like blew open a lid just now. Uh, okay, so this was in that town, Palisades Park, the very Korean town in New Jersey in Bergen County. So, my dad needed to get a haircut real quick. And there was a barber shop on Broad Avenue, like the main street. And I was just like there because it takes like 15, 20 minutes for a man to get his like haircut real fast. And all the barbers were men, gave him a haircut, and they were all like Korean ajashis, gave him a haircut. But there was a woman, like she was Latina, she was a Latinx woman, came and she was just cutting my dad's fingernails, like sat while he was getting his haircut. And there was something about that, like that movement, that motion, the fact that she came to like clip my dad's fingernails, touch his hand and stuff. Like there's like an intimacy happening that I was a child. I was like maybe sixth grade, fifth grade. I was a child, but I was sensitive to that.
Mm,
There's something about me that noticed it. And I was like, this makes me feel a little weird. Made me feel weird at the time. And perhaps this embedded history of this in Korea, perhaps that was lingering somewhere, helicoptering around in my subconscious somewhere for me to feel that way about this, even though what was happening was like totally just, I was like, this is part of the grooming ritual. It's like, you get a haircut, like shave, fingernail cutting. Okay, that's like part of the thing. But it's like, but it's a woman. How come the woman has to do this?
yeah,
This
yeah,
part. Oh.
absolutely. And tying it all back to like Korean dramas. While I was there, I would meet some older Korean men, and they would talk about, and we'd have like general conversations about, what was on TV or
Mm-hmm.
some star or
Mm-hmm.
talent, right?
Yeah.
And they were kind of joking with each other, and they would say something about tantara,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and what sort of I've kind of poked at that a little bit more and sort of discovered that they were talking about sort of a pejorative term for um, actors and actresses, singers, performers in a way because there was some kind of connection between that kind of performative uh, career
Mm-hmm.
and the compromise that comes with it that
Yeah.
is associated with potential sex work, right?
Yeah, yeah. The couch, the
Yeah,
producer's couch.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no different from Hollywood.
Hmm.
Hollywood is full of, you know, just nightmares. Nightmares, like it's the same like any entertainment industry, like anybody who has a dream to get out of their shit world,
Right.
their shittiest place with abusive parents, with, with predators and neighbors and uncles, all of that shit stuff. It's like, no, I'm meant for more. I'm meant for more. Let me go to Hollywood. Oh. abusive parent figures, abusive predator figures. They're all there. You just go through the same cycles, emotions over and over. Girl, you're a star. Yes, your face is on the big screen. Yeah, you're pretty. You're glamorous. You're all of that. You're talented. Yeah, but you're still doing the same thing over and over. Are the audiences not doing the same thing to them as well, right? Is the camera not doing the same thing with the male gaze? Is it not? Is the editor not doing the same thing? But it's like, again, we could go there, but at the same time, it's like, are they also not meeting their own need in a way? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is the audience's love also not registering? You know, to it's fleeting, right?
Mhm.
Kind of like for a comedian, when we get a laugh, fucking feels like love. It's so good. It's like, oh my God, like every cell in my body is like, in a state of praise, in a state of glory.
Isn't that why we go back to it, right? Like
That's
that,
why we do it.
continue to do it no matter how difficult things get.
That's why we
Um,
do it time and
yeah,
time again. That's why, even though our parents break our hearts, we go back to them time and time again because we remember the time that they were loving,
yeah.
or the time that they looked at us or listened to us or held us, you know, even though they were pieces of shit other times. It's the same thing.
What province did you go?
경상남도. So my grandparents are from 합천,
Mhm.
경상남도. My whole family's from 경상남도. My dad's from 고성, where they have all the dinosaur footprints.
Yeah.
My mom is from 합천, where they have Haeinsa Temple. And yeah, I spent a lot of my youth at my maternal grandparents' house.
So lots of fire, lots of uh, uh, yeah. No,
Wood, fire, yeah.
you my parents were all from Chungcheongnam-do,
Oh,
so everything's really slow.
yeah.
It's a very different cultural experience, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Not a lot of yelling.
Yeah. Chill,
Yeah, it's much
calm.
so chill. It's pretty calm. We still have that sort of generational, right,
Yeah. And
trauma.
and you moved to SoCal.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't move to New York City, to Brooklyn. No, you moved
Mm-mm.
to Southern California.
That's right. Well, the nurse, the Park Chung-hee era, nurse expert, uh, uh,
Yeah.
what my mom came here for. Yeah,
Ah, your mom was a nurse.
he was a nurse. Yeah.
What
So
about your dad?
my dad, he was working for like a gas fuel oil company, Condom.
Fuel.
Yeah. Um,
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
then left there to following my mom. And I like there's the mythology that they always told us. It was really all about like better opportunities for your children and all of that.
Uh-huh.
I like fully, wholeheartedly believed all of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to a large degree, I like it's a comfort to think that can for even now. But what's funny is that the you know talking to them, and I wouldn't have had these conversations with them had I not gone to Korea.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason I went, I went to school at UC Santa Barbara, and I wanted to stay there and maybe study abroad in like Spain or France or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was all set and ready to go to do that. But my grandmother passed away, and before she passed away, she was telling me and my brother like the stories of her youth, right?
Paternal
And
or maternal grandmother?
paternal,
Okay.
and I couldn't understand anything she was saying. It just I got away with little bits, but I couldn't really understand what she was talking about. So
What, because of the dialect or
just because I didn't know Korean,
oh, it was a language
it's
barrier.
a language barrier, and um, so then I said, okay, well, all right, that does it. I can't have that happen with my parents. So
Okay.
I went to study abroad in Korea, and I ended up staying there for nearly 4 years before I came back, and that changed our relationship dramatically. Like
Completely.
we could communicate with each other,
Yeah.
the sort of express more complex thoughts and emotions. And
That's the
um,
thing.
yeah,
Expressing complex thoughts.
yeah.
Yeah. The
So
inability to do
that's when
that.
that myth of coming to the States was sort of crumbled, right? So there
Yeah.
was more, because my dad was drinking more because of the fact that he was in this business, and he'd have to go to places and entertain people and do all of that. And my mom was like, let's not do that. Let's start
Right.
fresh. And
Right.
and it just
Mm.
became a different life. And so they came here, and they ran an Altadena Dairy, uh, which is a convenience store, right?
Mm.
The majority of my life.
So that's what your father did
Mhm.
while your mom was working as a nurse.
She initially worked as a nurse. He was trying to find work when they first got here, and then found some odd jobs. He worked at Korean Airlines for a while, doing
Wait, so
some.
she hold on. So she was sent to America to be a nurse, but then she couldn't be a nurse?
No, she established herself as a nurse, stayed
Uh-huh.
there for a few years. When my mom and dad saved up some money, they went in with their friends to purchase a convenience store, and
Um,
so to become more independent.
got
And
it.
which is, again, like that's like the American dream, right? The Korean American dream.
It's everybody's dream to be independent.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you read like okay, so in tarot cards, my favorite card is the Nine of Pentacles, and it represents financial liberation, financial independence.
right.
That is the ultimate dream, to work for yourself.
Yeah,
We don't want to work for some piece of shit. No.
yeah. I got into um, uh, in 2020 was when I started like acting professionally, right? Like doing a couple commercials here and there, um, and I was still working at UC Irvine up until last year, like February of last year.
Hmm.
Um, and holy crap, like I didn't ever imagine myself transitioning and trying to become uh, an actor,
Hmm.
or even, I mean, I studied sculpture at the art in
Yes.
Chicago, and that's where I got my MFA. And I was like, okay, this is that was the dream, right?
Yeah.
Continue to move in that direction. But the practical side of me was like, okay, we need some sort of work, and I had
Mm-hmm.
some marketing background, and
Mm-hmm.
so I started working at higher education institutions, and
Also, you have children. You're a
yeah,
breadwinner. Yeah.
that's and but now the my wife and I, we've discussed this, and we've moved into this place where I can explore this full time, and it was because um, I got hired to do this show, which is coming out pretty soon. I don't know when this podcast will air, but in early April, I think the show will
Mm-hmm.
come out, where I was
Mm-hmm.
a series regular for
Mm-hmm.
this comedy show.
Yeah.
Um, so we were able to take that and transition over, and I can't tell you, it feels so great to
Right.
do that rather
Yeah.
than manage a team.
Uh-huh.
I really was bad at it. I
Uh-huh.
was really bad at managing people, and I was also not good at like dealing with consistent uh, uh, petty human interactions. Right, that was
Yeah.
really really hard. And there are some people that are great at it, and good for them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
really applaud that. But personalities are not always set for those things. But yeah, I'm still. This is me learning how to be in this world, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
We're we're always at this beginning phase of something,
yeah,
like first of all, I'm so happy that you did that. That's like and I think the inner you is also very grateful to you for having made that decision. It's like it's like your whole body's like thank you so much, right? When that happens,
I could feel it.
it's such a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
Wow.
get in, bask in it.
And that's sort of how I met. I mean, we met at Peter's birthday party.
Yeah.
So I met Peter through sort of learning at the Second City and finding out a little bit more about him and
Yeah.
so many. I feel like I have, you know, a fraction of a percentage of just an introduction to this world.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that like the SAG Awards was just on Sunday,
Yeah.
seeing everything everywhere all at once. Just I mean,
Yeah.
I watched the clips on YouTube, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is uh, it feels like a seminal shift, right? Like this
Yeah.
tectonic shift
Yeah.
in which representation is different for Asian Americans. And I don't want to like say like maybe I'm just being a little bit too optimistic about it, but I'm
Be
pretty
optimistic about it because you're part of that shift too. And think of the timing of this movie coming out at your stage in your career, at my stage in my career. It's not a fucking accident. It's happening because the timing is now, you
right,
know?
right,
So be optimistic. Why let in the doubt? What's the point?
yeah.
What's the point of raining on our own fucking parade? Right?
Like that's the I think that is what I will have to continue to struggle with like
Yeah.
my whole life. That's how I was brought up, right? Like
Yeah, we're warring with ourselves.
right, right.
Inner conflict.
That is something that at some point I would love to be able to just trust me. I am,
Yeah.
I know what I'm.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
also, you could like look at your own choices, like, like you getting an MFA in sculpting, like you had a sense of trust, inner trust always, you know? It's like,
true.
I mean, isn't that like that's something, Like you like w when you were in New York, like rolling with like Fluxus team and like, hanging out with like Pingnam and shit, like that's like you were in it, you were always kind of in that world anyway. That world is no different from this world. It's the
Yeah,
same world, and that is the creative world. It's
yeah,
the it's the creative space where like we have to always let go and jump in and just trust ourselves that it's going to be okay while following our passion, while following like who and what we are. It's like
yeah,
I'm supposed to be a creative person. I'm not supposed to be sitting in some fucking office listening to some asshole talk about another asshole and try to mitigate. That's a
yeah.
fucking nightmare.
And
I'm
now
not meant for that.
20 years of that, right? Like of that life. So it doesn't come in a day. I think I'll continue to have to work on it and work on the doubts that I have and uh, uh, fight against my instinct to sort of say, okay, what's my plan B? Why can I always return back to something else that's more stable?
Right.
But that is what uh, I've been trained to think over the past like literally 20 years. And so,
And
uh,
also what our parents were trained to think
sure,
and
sure.
do, and what our grandparents were trained to think and do.
Yeah,
They always probably felt stuck in like, I did not have a choice. I did not have a choice. Even listen to the narrative that our parents say to us. We moved here for you. It's like, bitch, no, you didn't. You moved here for you.
yeah,
Stop making us feel guilty and ashamed. That's a whole nother layer that like diaspora Koreans need to, you know, try to remove from our state of being. Why should I feel burdened and ashamed and guilty
yeah,
for my parents not making their choices to improve their lives when they had that choice?
right.
Everybody always does. Sorry to say it, but that is a bottom line. Like,
Yeah,
I don't have a role model who is a strong woman who comes from my family. My mom would always like side with the aggressor. She would always side with the dominating force. My
yeah,
dad was so abusive, would, constantly call her names, berate her in front of her children. That's not a nice person. You know, a guy like that needs to be checked. You know, she has to clap back. But no,
Yeah.
she would sit there quietly, letting that stuff fester inside of her. And then where does she let that unleash that rage and anger? On her child. And I'm not the only one, you know, but Korean Americans don't want to talk about it. Oh, I can't talk about my parents like that. The shame. I can't do that. Oh my God, I'd rather die. Well, you are going to die a miserable death. That's going to turn into a cancer. It's going to explode in your head one day. You
Yeah.
know?
And it's
Like,
also part of like Korean culture when you sort of look at the dramas where there's um, unrequited, well, not unrequited love, but a forbidden love, right?
forbidden
And
love.
mother-in-law
Oh,
or the
that's so good. Yeah.
and then she she has her children are so um, combative with her or not agreeing with her approach that she gets ill, right?
Yeah.
And
Lays up with the
the,
white
the
thing tied around her forehead.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
and maybe becomes comatose, right? The hospital. Like that is just piling on guilt after guilt after guilt, and it's one of the only ways that they sort of express that. Um,
Yeah.
Taking that to a national scale, right? I remember while I was living in Korea between that time, they were, the Korean and Seoul government were thinking about uh, reconstituting and rebuilding Gyeongbokgung Palace,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because at the time there was a national museum there, but it was a colonial building from
Oh,
Japanese occupation,
okay.
and the debate was whether or not they wanted to how they were going to move that building, if they were going to demolish the building, or if they wanted to keep that building and display it someplace else, because um, they built that building, and like Pungsujiri, right? Like Feng Shui, Pungsujiri.
Uh, got it. Yep.
Um, they built that building right at the center of the four gates
Mm.
on Gyeongbok Palace, and there was a lot of sort of not just debate but discussion around why they did that, and it was
Yeah.
to destroy Korean identity,
Oh,
right, and sort of national pride.
uh-huh.
Have their building, their government building, right
Right.
at the center of the heart of Gyeongbok Palace.
Removing sovereignty. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And what I remember is that ultimately, I can't remember if they relocated the building or if they demolished the building, but
Yeah.
on the foundation of the building,
Yeah.
they found thousands of metal spikes
Huh.
that were inscripted,
Uh-huh.
um, that were used to disperse energy,
Huh.
right, and to kill the energy. And they would still find um, some of these spikes embedded in some of the mountains around Seoul,
Who put them there?
the Japanese government.
Jesus Christ.
So I mean, so how insipid, right? To understand that Pungsujiri is an important. This is the whole way that Seoul was established, right, along the Hangang, because of how these four gates where they stood, and how its proximity to water, right,
Mm-hmm.
life-giving water was important. And so this is where the geographically it made a lot of sense. Logistically, strategically, it made a lot of sense to be surrounded by mountains. It's why the Blue House is where the Blue House is. But to have the colonial building be built and have that energy dispersed around the connection of the four gates, that just blew me away. Like that level of animosity towards the country you are occupying, right?
Mm.
Um, it's a
Animosity, which is shared with fear,
yeah,
because it's like they know what they're doing. They know they're dominating and controlling, and they know that there's going to be a consequence to that someday. And so they want to control that by embedding these metal spikes here and there. And think of the way that water shapes metal, right? Like if you look at like just, Taoism and it's like the elements, like the sacred elements, like water and metal, they're always like they work together, like water shapes metal. That's fucking wild. Um, so wait, hold on. How does that connect to the the
It's really about the scale of control and
ah
the national sort of shame, right? And
mm-hmm.
trauma that we all sort of have, that we sort of live with, right?
I
Uh,
see.
from the entire country has had
Yeah.
to do with. I mean, I go back. I think about like my mom. Originally, she was named Sonja, right?
Wow.
And Sonja was I forgot the Japanese equivalent. The cha is like ko, like akiko or makiko, or so she was forced to have a Japanese name, right? When she was younger,
Uh-huh.
she was like, "Fuck that! I don't want that anymore." So when she had some agency, she changed her name to Pak Hyunja Sunja, so it's Hyunsun, right? And so she doesn't ever want to go by that anymore. Um, and what's fascinating, I think, to me is my aunt's name is Chongja, right? And that level of control, colonial control, I think it is still embedded in like our culture, our society, our family lives to a
In
large
our
extent.
in our spirit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The conflict.
It's so close to us. But going back to what we were talking about earlier about like the growth of irony and kitsch and things along those lines, that I think moving away from a subsistence culture, right, and economy where there's more luxury to be able to um, think and display complexity.
Uh-huh.
That is, I think, where you know the strength of Korean culture and media has shifted, right? Like it's because of how our proximity to that trauma that we are able to continue to do things that is vibrant and growth has a growth mindset, right?
Yeah. And to laugh and to be
Yeah,
able to laugh at, oh, remember that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's so crazy that your mom's name is Park Sunja. My mom's name was Park Sunyo, and she didn't like the 녀 because it was 계집녀.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that was like, like none of my other aunts, they're fucking she has like 큰이모, she has like five. They're five daughters. None of the other daughters were named 녀. But my mom was named 녀.
what was
Like they
what was her place? Is she the
she
youngest?
renamed herself as Park Sunyoung. Young.
Young. Yeah, yeah,
Sunyoung. But she kept the Sun, just like your mom kept the Sun.
yeah.
Uh and my mom gave up her maternal name too. She goes by Chung Sunyoung, my dad's name. She adopted my dad's name, Chung. There's like I sense a visceral, I mean it's deep, like my mom's so fucking repressed. It's like unbelievable. But I sense that her wanting to distance from her family, her parents, like with such intensity. I sense that. She moved to America for that. I know that subconsciously it's there. Just like I moved away from New York to California to get the fuck away from her, you know? To that from them, from my family, for the same reason, you know? It's like these things that we try to put a lid over and be like, I'm never gonna look at that again because it causes me so much agony and shame. It never ever stays closed.
Yeah.
It cycles out, comes out in some weird way in a different direction. Always, it's inevitable. I think we
Yeah.
just have to accept that that's inevitable. That's inevitable, And I think that's what these media storytellings and storytellers do. Always that
Right.
they're key. They're always revealing that to us. You know.
I do have to say that there was a lot of trepidation on my part to sort of quit my stable job and move into this. And the person I was most nervous about talking to about this was my parents,
Mm-hmm.
especially my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And because
Even though you're a grown man,
oh yeah,
married with children, you're still afraid of mom and dad. Yep.
yeah, and he grew up very post-joke, right? Like he
Mm-hmm.
very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up. His father never entered the kitchen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And would look down. He would also never tilt his head down to eat pop, right, or
Mm.
soup. He
Mm.
would always bring it up to his lips because by going down to your spoon, you're bowing
You're
to
submitting. Yeah.
you're submitting. Yeah, so he would never.
Yeah.
And
And they sit at the head of the table. They have to
yeah,
reach for the spoon first nobody else can eat until he eats first.
right. Now, I so that's how my dad grew up. But
Yeah.
I think coming here, he like it shifted and changed him dramatically over time. Like it just whittled away, and the amount of change and growth
Yeah.
that I've noticed in him has been dramatic. So
Yeah.
when I asked him about this, I was so surprised because he was my biggest supporter.
Oh.
He stopped and said, when his younger sister wanted to try something like that and go and try to do a play, he
Mm-hmm.
was adamantly against it,
Yeah.
and it hurt her,
Of
right?
course.
And he said that he's been reading a lot. He's 83 now, so he's been reading a lot about almost 83, but he's been reading a lot about death and dying and he said the thing that people regret the most is not whether they've made more money or if they've had more titles, but it's just that they didn't take more risk in their lives. And so,
Risk for the thing that they love.
yes, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And that's why he was supportive, and
It's
I
cool
was
with it.
just really very 감동적이야, right? Like,
Yeah, it's
so
moving.
moving for me.
Because you weren't expecting that
No,
response.
no, not at all.
You were afraid.
Yeah,
How did your mom respond?
the same way. She,
That's so gracious of them.
yeah. And so it tells me that their time in the States and their, lifelong learning, they're constantly reading and they're constantly looking at new things. Like,
Yeah.
when 9/11 happened, my dad, his approach to trying to understand it was to read the Quran and read as much as he could about uh, uh, the Muslim religion because he comes from um, he's never been a religious studies major, but he's always been interested in religion, so
It's a
he's
curious man.
very curious. So growing up, I went from being Presbyterian when we first came here to Southern Baptist to Catholic and a very progressive Catholic church
Mm-hmm.
to just not having to deal with that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I remember also in your podcast you're talking about Cheza, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was very important for me too, was
Mm-hmm.
to consider that. And we have such a big family, like I was like, oh my god, how many Cheza do we have to do? Like how often do we have to do this?
Can't keep up.
Every day.
But the
Um,
thing is, like, you could always do, I think the right answer to that is not to overexert to the point
yeah,
of resentment. It's do what you can manage. It's the intention and the mindfulness and the awareness that counts, not putting every single, like the fish and the beef and the sweets it doesn't fucking matter. They
yeah,
don't care. They don't care. It's like they just want to be remembered. They just want to be acknowledged. They just want the recognition. That's the only fucking thing that matters. If
yeah,
all you have back when Korea was a ravaged country and they were still, reconstructing out of the war rubble, How could they do chesa? They can't even eat
Good.
themselves,
Yeah.
you know? So what would they do? They would just put out a bowl of fucking water. That's all they could do. That's all that mattered, you
Yeah.
know? But to not do it at all, to do away with it completely out of the fear of a Western God, you know, out of a Western dogma that says like only Christianity is the thing that matters and everything else is hell and death and demons. That's fucking insane. It's psychotic. How?
Well,
How? I don't accept. I don't accept.
and good, right? Like because
Yeah.
there are some traditions that are, um, if practiced, are centering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
Exactly.
just external, right?
Exactly.
And when I grew up, Chesa was so important for us because of the fact that it was the moment we brought family together,
Uh,
right? And it was just that's what I remember the most.
Back
It,
to the love.
how we all came together, multiple generations, you know, it's
Perhaps
where
it was an excuse
yeah, yeah.
for reunions.
Now it's not that big of a deal for my parents either. It's
They're
not, and
tired. They're
yeah,
fucking tired.
they're tired, so they can think terms that are a lot more practical about, who's going to
Exactly.
remember them, how they'll.
Always. Always. That's like Koreans really need to learn that. It's like do what you can manage. Do not overexert. You don't need to kill yourself to do anything. That's
Yeah.
not the way to live life, you know? Like the reason why, Chesa was also resented is because women resented it. You know,
Hmm.
it's not fucking grandpa and uncle and dad in the kitchen cooking alongside them. It's fucking mom
Yeah.
waking up at 3 a.m. to cook for a huge family
Yeah.
and to serve the ghosts. You know, like it's a lot for
It's
one woman to do.
yeah.
So like even the concept of Chisa, like these traditions and cultures, like they cannot stay in a rigid sort of space. If
Yeah.
you insist on the rigidity, that's when the tension and the rage and the blaming and the agony happens. That's where you bring on more shitty ghosts. You know, it's like do what you can manage. Just the intention is what matters. Like in your family's intention, it was like reunion, gathering together. Us, lovely, right? Like follow the loveliness, follow the love, follow the ease. Don't do anything but that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, love it. I love it. I love that you're in this, like you're in a transition phase too. And
Absolutely.
and you're like sort of realigning in this new space. Like your identity is also realigning and catching up to a newer you. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think part of why I'm so grateful that you asked me to be part of this podcast is that I don't know the community. I don't have a community yet, right? I'm still
Hmm.
learning about things, and it was when we were at Peter's birthday party, I was overwhelmed that there's so many people that were part of uh, uh, the industry, right?
Yeah,
And or attempting to be part, or working in some way, shape, or form, like really living a creative life.
yeah.
And I saw that I'm not great with crowds, right? Or
Uh-huh. Yeah,
so like, okay, I had to make a
yeah.
quick exit, but it is the thing that like I was so impressed by,
Hmm.
and it was also because so many of that group, right, that was there, they all look like us, and
Hmm.
thank God, right? It's a voice, it's a representation that I think like that we can have this conversation is just it, it means a lot. So I
Yeah,
appreciate.
yeah. And it helps us to be brave. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm not alone. I don't have to feel alone and afraid. It's like they're being brave too. They're being brave too. Like, oh, and I'm so grateful for you. Right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for making the time. I'm so happy that I went to Peter's birthday party too. Because, it's like, it's Peter. He's a personality, you know.
No, absolutely.
That's why the people gather because he's a personality. But it's like I always notice like around Peter, like there's like an orbit of like fun and interesting people, you know. And I'm glad that like we got to meet and talk and hang out and you know. And I'm grateful that you got to make this time today too. So thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.